Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, what does it really take for a good person? Someone kind, ethical, compassionate, to cross the line into cruelty, even monstrosity? Now, imagine this: what if all the laws and rules holding society together disappeared overnight? Would you still be that good, law-abiding citizen you think you are? Or would something darker take over? And here's the uncomfortable truth: the distance between the person you are and the villain you swear you'd never become is way thinner than you'd like to believe. And today, I'm going to prove it to you, because you're not as far from becoming the villain as you think. Trust me, I didn't want to believe it either, until I came across a book that grabbed me by the metaphorical shirt collar and shook me wide awake. The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. And no, this isn't one of those soft, philosophical, why do bad things happen to good people kind of reads. This one hits like a punch to the gut, because it doesn't just ask why good people turn bad, it throws the answer right in your face. It could be you. Yes, you. But hey, before you slam your phone shut in denial, stick with me. We're about to journey through the twisted corridors of human psychology, with a few plot twists, uncomfortable truths, and wake-up calls along the way. So buckle up. This ride's gonna get bumpy. Let's start with something small. A gentle jab at that shiny image you have of yourself. You probably see yourself as one of the good ones. Maybe you've held the door for a stranger, or stayed late at work to help a colleague finish a project. And deep down, you probably tell yourself, I'm one of the good ones. I'd never cross that line. But let's hit pause on that for a second and get brutally honest. Have you ever told a small lie to avoid trouble? Maybe fudged your arrival time on a timesheet? Or even used your neighbor's Wi-Fi without asking? Just because you knew you wouldn't get caught? There's a reason I'm asking. Because according to Zimbardo, and trust me, the guy knows what he's talking about, evil doesn't usually arrive wearing a devil costume. It's sneaky. It's a slow, slippery slope that starts with tiny, seemingly innocent steps. Let me introduce you to someone, Chris Dalton. You've probably never heard of him, and that's exactly the point. Chris was your typical neighborhood guy. Loved basketball, joked around with friends, called his mom every Sunday. But then he was deployed to a military prison overseas, and that's where everything changed. The same guy who once helped his elderly neighbor carry groceries became part of one of the most disturbing cases of prisoner abuse in recent history. And here's the hard truth. Chris wasn't some born villain. He was stable, average, normal. So, what flipped the switch? The environment did. And if you're sitting there thinking, that could never be me, I hate to break it to you, you're already missing the point. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. That line between good and evil is thinner, way thinner than you'd like to believe. You might still be clinging to this comforting idea that your personality is set in stone, unchangeable, predictable, like some constellation fixed in the night sky. But let's go ahead and smash that comfy little belief you're holding on to, that idea that your personality is some rock-solid, unchangeable thing. Hate to break it to you, but it's not. The truth? Who you are isn't etched in stone. It's scribbled in wet sand, just waiting for the next wave, the next situation to come along and wipe it clean. Zimbardo calls this the situational approach. You're not the same person in every setting. Think about it. How do you act when you're at a loud concert with your buddies? Now compare that to how you behave during a job interview. Same you? Not even close. Let's crank this up a notch. Now imagine this. You've signed up for what you believe is a scientific memory experiment. Your role? You're the teacher. Your task? Every time the learner gets an answer wrong, you hit a button that delivers an electric shock. Seems harmless at first. The shocks start low, just a little zap. But with every wrong answer, the voltage increases. 100 volts, 200 volts, 300 volts. until you're hovering over a button labeled 450 volts, potentially lethal. And the person in the next room, they're screaming, begging, pleading for you to stop. But there's a guy in a white lab coat, an authority figure, standing over your shoulder, calmly saying, "Please continue. The experiment requires it." Now here's the gut punch. In the real-world version of this experiment, called the Milgram experiment, a staggering 65% of people went all the way. Ordinary folks, people like you, delivering what they believed were deadly shocks. They weren't villains. They weren't sadists. They were just people, caught in the wrong situation with the wrong voice of authority looming over them. And Zimbardo's message here? Crystal clear and chilling. Given the wrong set of circumstances, any one of us can be turned into a tool of harm. Yep, even you. Still with me? Good. Because we're about to slide even further down the rabbit hole. Zimbardo didn't just write about this stuff from the sidelines. No. He decided to roll up his sleeves and run one of the most infamous psychological experiments in modern history, the Stanford Prison Experiment. 24 college students, clean-cut, middle-class, psychologically healthy, nothing that screams future war criminal on their resumes. They were randomly assigned roles. Half became guards, the other half prisoners. The guards got uniforms, batons, and just for extra flair, mirror-lensed sunglasses to hide their eyes. The prisoners, stripped, deloused, and given numbers. No names, just digits. Identity erased. And here's where things went from interesting social experiment to full-blown psychological horror show. Within days, literally days, the guards started to enjoy their newfound power. They humiliated prisoners, forced them to urinate in buckets, stripped them naked, locked them in dark closets for hours as punishment. And the most jaw-dropping part? All of this unfolded in just 6 days. That's all it took before Zimbardo himself had to shut the whole thing down. 6 days for everyday college kids to morph into something almost unrecognizable. So, what's the big takeaway from all this psychological chaos? Simple but brutal. Given the right pressure, your moral compass can crack faster than glass under a sledgehammer. You probably like to think you'd rise above it all. That if you were in the same situation as Frederick or those Stanford guards, you'd be the exception. The hero. The one who stood their ground. But deep down, can you say that with absolute certainty? I don't think so. So what exactly flips that internal switch? What turns regular people into villains while others manage to hold the line? Zimbardo points his psychological flashlight at one especially nasty ingredient in this whole mess. Obedience to authority. Whether it's a person, an institution, or just some rigid set of rules, authority has a way of making even the most principled among us do things we'd never imagine. Let's jump back to Milgram's experiment for a minute. Remember those participants cranking up electric shocks? They weren't evil masterminds. They weren't sadists hiding in plain sight. They were just following instructions, believing they were helping science, serving some greater purpose. And spoiler alert, this whole obedience to authority problem didn't start with Milgram, and it sure as hell didn't end there. Want a darker example? Let's talk about Jonestown. Let's talk about Jim Jones for a second. A man who started off preaching hope, unity, and the dream of a better world. But over time, that dream twisted into something darker, something dangerous. His followers, they believed in him. They hung on his every word. And when the day came, they drank poison, handed to them by the very man they trusted most. More than 900 lives, gone in a single horrifying act of blind obedience. Not because they were bad people, but because they stopped questioning. Now let's turn the mirror on you for a second. When was the last time you actually stopped and challenged the people giving you the orders? Or do you usually just nod along, assuming they've got it all figured out? Maybe it's time to start having those tough conversations with yourself before you end up in over your head, realizing too late that you're sinking in your own bad choices. But wait, we're not done yet, because authority is just one player on this morally slippery stage. There's another culprit, just as sneaky, just as dangerous: the loss of personal responsibility. Imagine this: you're back in that Milgram setup. Your hand is literally hovering over that dial. The person in the next room is screaming, begging, pleading. But hey, why feel guilty? The guy in the lab coat said he'll take full responsibility, right? So you're just following protocol. This mindset where people shrug off ownership of their actions because someone else said it was okay. That's called de-individuation. And let me tell you, it's one hell of a slippery slope. Why some folks turn into completely different people when leaving anonymous reviews online. Why online trolls and cyberbullies feel invincible behind anonymous usernames. Because the second you feel like no one can trace your actions back to you, that's when the moral brakes start to fail. If any of this is hitting home, if you're finding yourself nodding along, realizing how real this gets, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we've got a lot more of these uncomfortable but necessary conversations coming your way. To really drive this terrifying truth home, Zimbardo decided to step out of the lab and into the real world with an experiment. Here's what he did. He left a broken-down car on the streets of the Bronx, an area where people tend to mind their business, and anonymity is the neighborhood's unofficial motto. What happened next? Within hours, the car was gutted, windows smashed, parts stolen, graffiti sprayed across the hood like a warning sign. But then, Zimbardo tried the same thing in Palo Alto, a quiet, suburban community where people were more likely to bump into their neighbor at the grocery store. And guess what? That same lonely car sat there untouched. Days went by, not a scratch. Why? Because when people feel like they're being seen, like there's a chance someone might recognize them, they're a lot less likely to let their worst instincts off the leash. This experiment exposed something deeply uncomfortable. When people think no one's watching, their moral filters loosen fast. Now, let me turn this back on you for a second. How many of you, sitting comfortably behind your screens, have typed something online, something you'd never dare say if you were face-to-face with the person? Scary how easy it is to hide. And if you're nodding right now, yeah, you get it. But anonymity is just one crack in the foundation. Let's peel back another layer. Dehumanization. This is where empathy goes to die. So how do ordinary people cross that moral line and do unspeakable things to others? Simple. They stop seeing them as people at all. It's a mental trick, an ugly little loophole in human psychology that's been used to justify some of the darkest chapters in history. Zimbardo points to a chilling study led by psychologist Albert Bandura at Stanford. Here's how it played out. Students were put in charge of overseeing and punishing another group. Before the task started, some of them overheard a casual conversation, one that described the other group in terms like animals and savages. The result? Those students? They dished out way harsher punishments than the students who were told the other group was thoughtful or insightful. Words matter. Perception matters. And the moment you strip away someone's humanity, it becomes disturbingly easy to justify cruelty. And before you think, that's history, that's psychology class stuff. It's not today. Pause. Really think. Scroll through your newsfeed. Listen to the language people casually throw around online, in politics, even in everyday conversations. How often do you hear entire groups reduced to words like vermin, garbage, filth? How often do people shrug off suffering because those people somehow deserve it? And here's the nightmare fuel. The second you let yourself believe that someone else is less than human, you're already standing at the doorway to your own dark side. And if you thought that was bad, it gets darker. Because now let's talk about language, not the loud, hateful kind, but the quiet, sanitized, corporate speak kind. The kind of language that makes evil sound acceptable. This is where euphemisms slide in like wolves in sheep's clothing. Beating prisoners? Let's dress it up as aggressive questioning. Forcing people from their homes? Let's label it population control. It's like giving the devil a makeover and hoping no one notices the horns poking out. Zimbardo dives deep into how this soft, polished language, combined with powerful ideologies, gives people just enough emotional distance to commit horrors and still sleep like babies at night. Let's circle back to the Milgram experiment one more time. Participants believed they were doing something noble, helping with scientific research, advancing knowledge. But behind that thin layer of justification, they were pressing buttons that they thought were electrocuting another human being. The setup told them, "You're helping," but they were hurting. And that's the danger. Wrap cruelty in the right story, and people will not only comply, they'll feel good doing it. This is how ideology can camouflage evil. When you twist the story just enough, when you dress violence in the robes of duty or righteousness, even the most horrific acts can be justified, even applauded. So the next time someone sugarcoats brutality, don't just nod. Look deeper. Ask yourself, what are they really hiding beneath that polished pitch? But let's not drown in despair just yet, because here's the other half of Zimbardo's message, the part that matters just as much. Yes, you have the potential for darkness, but you also have the power to resist it. Just because you're standing near the edge doesn't mean you have to fall. You're not a puppet of your environment, unless you hand over the strings. So what's the antidote? Personal responsibility. Owning your choices, even when it would be easier to hide behind a badge, a title, or a crowd. Remember, in that same Milgram experiment, not everyone obeyed. Some people stopped. They put down the dial. They refused, not because they were immune to pressure, but because they chose to be accountable. They made a decision in that moment to act like humans, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And that's the heart of resistance. It's not a talent. It's a choice, a conscious, uncomfortable, sometimes lonely choice. And it's not made once. It's made over and over again. Every time you're asked to look away. Every time you're told to just follow orders. Every time it's easier to go along than to stand up. The difference between becoming the villain or staying human is not grand. It's not cinematic. It's whether you speak up when everyone else stays silent. So how do you keep yourself from slipping? There's no magic formula, but there is a starting point. You have to question authority. That's the truth. Question everything. Don't let uniforms, job titles, or confident voices hypnotize you into thinking they're above being wrong. Zimbardo's research hammers this home. When authority goes unchecked, even the kindest souls can be manipulated into crossing moral lines. It's easy to assume that those in charge know best, that they're acting with your best interests in mind. But history says otherwise, loudly. From Milgram's test subjects delivering fake shocks to screaming strangers, to the blind obedience that ended in mass suicide at Jonestown, the warning signs are flashing in neon. Unquestioned authority is a dangerous compass. But here's the twist, you're not just some helpless pawn in this game. You have a brain, a voice, a will, and sometimes that's all it takes to stop yourself from tumbling into moral freefall. So the next time someone tells you, just do it, and something inside you twinges, pause, think, question, push back if you have to. That moment of resistance, it might just be the line between playing the role of a follower and stepping into the shoes of a hero. Speaking of heroes, let's talk about them. Because while we've spent time in the shadows of human behavior, there's another path, the brighter one. The one paved by people who act, even when fear says freeze. Zimbardo doesn't leave us in despair. He hands us a rope, a way out, and it's not complicated. It starts with choice, with courage, with doing. You see, heroes aren't built in labs. They're not born with capes or glowing hearts. They're made in moments. The moment you act when others stall. The moment you speak up when silence is safer. And now we arrive at the hardest pill to swallow, Zimbardo's ultimate revelation. Inside you, inside me, inside all of us, lives both light and shadow. We are not just heroes in waiting or villains in disguise. We are both, walking paradoxes, capable of compassion that moves mountains, and cruelty that can tear them down. This isn't some one-time crossroads you face once in your life. No, it's a daily tug-of-war, a never-ending internal struggle. One day you're holding the door open for a stranger. The next, you're turning your back on someone who needs help. The battlefield, it's you. The weapon, awareness. Zimbardo pleads with us to stop pretending evil is some external force with horns and a pitchfork. It's not out there. It's not hiding in some distant corner of the world. It's much closer. It's within. And that realization shouldn't paralyze you. It should wake you up. When you understand this inner split, when you accept that you're capable of both destroying and saving, only then can you truly take control of who you choose to be. Awareness becomes your shield. It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you intentional. This isn't about living in fear of what you might become. It's about choosing, day by day, moment by moment, what version of yourself you're going to show the world. At this point, one truth is glaringly clear. Good and evil aren't lofty ideas for philosophy class. They're real, tangible, and the line between them, that line is fragile, bendable, shifting with every situation you enter, every decision you make. And if you're still here, still reflecting, still with me, then let's make it official. Drop this in the comments right now. I understood it. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smack that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more conversations like this. And trust me, you'll want to be here for them.